30 seconds and counting. 25 seconds and counting. We are still go. 20 seconds. Guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening to my viewers in Europe and Africa. Good afternoon to my viewers in the Western Hemisphere. Good morning to my viewers in the Pacific Rim. Welcome to a special bulletin here on the Angry Astronaut, a special live stream event. I wasn't sure if I was actually going to do this, but I have decided to cover this particular event because some of my favorite companies are actually engaged in this particular bid for handling an important aspect of the Artemis mission, and that is the unpressurized rover that will provide astronauts with mobility starting with Artemis 5. However, before we get to that, where's everybody checking in from? We have people who have already pointing that out. We got folks New Zealand and Devon and Stockton, California. And we have Indiana, Rhode Island, hello, British Columbia. We have upstate New York, west of Antarctica, hills of Kentucky, hello, Kentucky. Mulheim on Ruhr, hello, Carl. And what else do we got here? Four Marks UK, hello, John. Thank you very much for joining us today. Coast of Maine, USA, hello, Naked Gardner. Thank you very much for joining us. We also have Nottinghamshire. Hello. Thank you very much. Unpressurized, so a moon buggy. Yes, that is pretty much what it is. Hello, Houston. Hello, Enfield, London. And to another space nut, our fantastic producer, back with us after Joel Ryder did a live stream for us. So thanks very much to Joel, and welcome back to ASN. Hello, Minchin, and hello, Georgia, USA, and hello, Fayetteville and Paris. Hello, Utah and Liverpool, Tucson, Clifton, Ireland, and South Florida. Hello, Quebec. Hello, Hell itself. Hello, West Metro Atlanta and Yorkshire. Hello, Taiwan and shaky Taiwan. Yes, I suppose so. I hope everybody is safe. Everyone you care about is safe there in Taiwan. Hello, New Hampshire and North Carolina. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. So a while ago, and right now you're watching NASA TV. They should be going live with this selection award statement, this press event in about 12 minutes. And NASA, of course, we all know that Japan is looking to provide a pressurized rover, perhaps by 2029 or so, although it's probably going to be a lot later than that, because the pressurized rover mobile habitat will probably not be needed until some of the later Artemis missions. So Artemis 3 and Artemis 4, neither of those are going to require any sort of real mobility. It's Artemis 5. And by the way, the Artemis 5 is scheduled to be handled not by SpaceX, but rather by Blue Origin. So part of NASA's decision process tonight in terms of who they want or who's going to be selected to handle this rover is going to be partially based on the idea that Blue Moon is going to be carrying it, not Lunar Starship. And that could make a difference in terms of size, that sort of thing. So there are a number of companies who have proposals in front of NASA right now, and are going to one or perhaps two of these are going to be selected tonight. You have Lockheed Martin and General Motors who are teaming up. Goodyear also providing the tires apparently for this thing. They're looking to provide a lunar rover. Then you also have Northrop Grumman combining with Intuitive Machines. Of course, you may recognize Intuitive Machines. They're the ones who did the Odysseus lander that recently sat down on the moon. So they are also a prospective competitor. You also have Teledyne Brown Engineering, who are collaborating with my friends at Sierra Space. So that's another possibility, another possible selection. In addition to that, you have a company called Astrolab, and they have a rover called the Flex that they have put in front of NASA. And then finally, you have my friends at Dynetics, also Leidos. So if you hear an announcement tonight that says Leidos, it's actually Leidos / Dynetics. Leidos bought out Dynetics a couple of years ago, and slowly but surely the two companies have kind of meshed together. So these are the 5 different companies that have proposals in front of NASA. Now, obviously, Lunar Starship is also going to carry this rover because this is a rover that's going to be used on multiple missions, not just on Artemis 5. But nevertheless, you need to have a rover that's going to be compatible with both Blue Moon and with Lunar Starship. Now, of course, this is a small scale rover, and it's electric power is usually what they have in mind. Power cells, maybe fuel cells, that sort of thing. By the way, John Morgan, thank you so much for the tenor to help for my trip. Yes, also a quick reminder to everybody, I am leaving for Colorado Springs on Monday. Actually, I'm heading to South Carolina first to see my son perform in a Clemson jazz ensemble, the Clemson University. They do that twice a year. Unfortunately, Space Symposium is taking place at exactly the same time. So I'm going to go see him and then go straight to Space Symposium, where I'm going to have an opportunity to interview Sierra Space again. They have some new folks there, kind of getting into some new territory with Sierra Space and Dream Chaser that I've been trying to keep up with. But SpaceX is also represented at the symposium, Rocket Lab, ULA, all the big players and all the big players from all over the world are represented at Space Symposium. This is the biggest space convention in the United States. And any support I can get would be deeply appreciated. My ticket is already bought. Fortunately, I've got support in the United States, some guys who helped me out with frequent flyer miles for domestic flights. So really, it's only the flight to and from New York. That's my only expense. So this is not an expensive thing. So I appreciate any support I can get because it makes a massive difference for a trip like this. Because obviously we've got the next flight of Starship, and I don't want to miss that either. It's kind of tough to balance the expenses of all of these trips. But at the same time, I really want to make sure that I bring you the most important coverage. And Space Symposium is a very, very, very important event. And I want to make sure I bring you all the details from Space Symposium because there's a lot going on. Colorado Springs for Symposium. It's here. Yes, Colorado Springs, once again, is my hometown. So very excited about that. And I'm hoping on the night of the 10th, actually, to take a couple of my British colleagues on a little tour of Colorado Springs to show them the things that the tourists don't get to see. We'll see how all that works out. But in any event, it should be an interesting event, and I'm looking forward to it. So once again, this is an unpressurized rover. It will probably it depends on what NASA's philosophy is on all of this, but it will very likely bear a great deal of resemblance to the rovers that we saw with Apollo. Apollo's rovers worked very well. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think it's very likely that we are going to see an upgraded rover in terms of computers, in terms of communications, that sort of thing. But other than that, I think it's going to be very similar. Rodney, thank you so much for the $20 New Zealand. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks for joining us today. Right now, as you can see on NASA TV, they are also advertising the full solar eclipse, which sadly I am going to miss, even though I will be arriving in the United States at approximately the time that this eclipse will be taking place. I'll be landing in New York and nowhere near the eclipse. I was hoping that I might be on a flight crossing over the eclipse as it happened or something like that, but unfortunately that's not what's going to be taking place. We have over 200 people joining us tonight. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And thanks very much to the folks who've been supporting Super Chat wise and also on Patreon, PayPal, etc. All of that's in the description if you'd like to participate there and become part of our Discord community. So almost a year ago, I attended the unveiling of the Dynetics rover, and I covered that event live. I actually had an opportunity to see it previously at Dynetics headquarters in Huntsville, Alabama, before the unveiling was done. So it was a very interesting thing to get an opportunity to see the rover, right as it was being unveiled to the public. And their project is actually being done in association with NASCAR. NASCAR is actually participating in their project. And really, you have a lot of automotive companies who have gotten in on the game with this rover project with all of the 5 proposals. Apollo Lunar rover required assembly on the lunar surface. Good point, Michael. And that actually may be a requirement with a couple of these too, although I believe that is something NASA's trying to avoid. And fortunately, since you have sizable cargo bays with Lunar Starship especially, but also even Blue Moon has pretty sizable cargo volume, should be able to transport an unpressurized rover without a problem. Chris, thank you so much for the tenor. Really, really appreciate it. Nowhere near the eclipse, that's true. Be able to see was the clouded one in 1999. Yes, I was fortunate enough to see a total lunar eclipse in Greenville, South Carolina in 2017. And that was a magical, magical moment. Truly astonishing. As they say, a total lunar eclipse breaks the sky. And I think that's a very appropriate way of describing it. The sky is transformed in a way that you just have to see it to understand it. And it is frightening, and it is astonishing, and it is exciting, and it confuses the wildlife. It is an amazing event that I think would have terrified and amazed humans for many millennia. And the fact that some people actually were sophisticated enough to understand what was going on centuries ago, some of the astronomers of the Maya and such were able to figure out what was going on with some of this. That's really amazing that people way back then could figure out that there was nothing, to be afraid of with these kinds of events. So Panzer Shrimp, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Really appreciate that support. And over 250 people watching today. That's great. Really appreciate that. Obviously, this is not a Starship event or anything like that, but it's important. This is going to provide some of the mobility for the early Artemis missions. It's very important that we get a good vehicle for the astronauts to be able to explore some distance away from their landing site. This is especially the case now that we have 2 larger landers selected for Artemis, both Blue Moon and Lunar Starship are very big, and therefore there's going to be restricted places where they can land, restricted areas that are flat enough to accommodate these big, tall lunar landers. That being the case, then they might have to land a considerable distance away from areas that they want to explore, areas with lunar ice, areas with important resources. So you want to have a good rover that's going to be able to transport astronauts out to these locations. And in the early stages of Artemis, these are going to be unpressurized rovers until we have a fully pressurized rover that currently is scheduled to be taken care of by JAXA, the Toyota Moon Cruiser. So we'll see what ends up with that. Very exciting indeed. So we'll see what ends up happening. Once again, really appreciate everybody joining. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. We're waiting now for the press conference to go live at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston. They should be going live any second now to cover this event. I am personally pulling for my two favorites, for Sierra Space and for Dynetics / Leidos. I think Dynetics, they really deserve to get an award at this point. After losing multiple opportunities for HLS, I think it's time for NASA to give them an opportunity to show what they can do. I mean, obviously, NASA has already given them an opportunity with the Universal Stage Adapter for SLS. Dynetics has been working on that for years. And that is a very important part of the Artemis mission, an important component that makes SLS, a little more useful, makes it a little bit more effective than it might be otherwise. It gives it a much larger cargo volume and the capability to carry crew and a lot of cargo all at the same time. Oh, looks like NASA is going live right now. So let's join NASA's broadcast in progress. Thanks very much for joining us. Yeah, we're waiting for NASA's music to stop, and then we'll go from there. Graham, thank you so much for the 20 quid. Really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. So as soon as this music is done, this copyrighted music, here we go.
And limited sunlight at the moon's south pole demand a truly off-road and off-planet vehicle. It will let us conduct science and locate new resources, and that will help us go deeper into our solar system. We're building on over 5 decades of experience, and this time it will operate with or without astronauts on board, enabling continuous exploration and science on the lunar surface.
Okay. All right, we have some audio problems apparently. We're trying to get this dealt with right now. At the moment, they haven't really announced anything. I didn't realize we had audio problems. All right. So just obviously, this is the LTV,
Good afternoon,
the non-pressurized rover. And this is just simply, and the award is being made right now. They haven't really said anything that we didn't already know. Not sure why we've run into audio issues, so I apologize. All right. We're once again rebooting rebooting the feed here in order to try to get audio. I have no idea what's happening here, guys. Producer's working on it right now. Once again, nothing all that exciting happening right now. They're just doing a quick summation, everybody thanking each other at NASA, that sort of thing.
To Mars. Building on commercial collaboration that started in low Earth orbit. We're fostering a commercial space
Sorry, guys,
economy
but we finally
with
got
private sector and international partners. In view of this, I am pleased to announce, after a very thorough and rigorous procurement process, NASA is selecting 3 awardees to provide lunar terrain vehicle services. The awardees are Intuitive Machines, represented by Steve Artemis, CEO and co-founder; Lunar Outposts, represented by Justin Cyrus, CEO and founder; and Venturi Astrolab, represented by Jarrett Matthews, CEO and founder. Congratulations.
Thank you.
This capability is being added to the other Artemis elements. The excitement here is tremendous as we are training our Artemis II crew for an upcoming test flight to the lunar vicinity next year. These will be the first humans to venture to deep space since 1972, at the close of the Apollo era. They will board an Orion spacecraft on top of a Space Launch System rocket and be launched from a mobile launch platform at Kennedy Space Center. Our astronauts, engineering, operations, and health and medical teams are working with other commercial and international partners on vehicle and systems that will support sustainable lunar missions. Johnson Space Center is proud to lead other critical elements of the Artemis architecture, including commercial lunar payload services that provides robotic exploration activities, Gateway, which is humanity's first space station around the moon, as well as our exploration-capable, commercially provided spacesuits. In support of future Artemis missions, Gateway will play a key role in helping NASA and its partners learn how to live sustainably on another body. The Orion spacecraft will dock with the Gateway, and our astronauts will perform crew-tended operations while preparing for surface operations via commercially developed human landing systems. As astronauts explore the South Pole region of the moon during our Artemis missions, they'll be able to go farther and conduct more science than ever before, thanks to the Lunar Terrain Vehicle. Think of a hybrid of the Apollo-style lunar rover that was driven by our astronauts and an uncrewed mobile science platform. This will give the crew the capability to travel a distance much further from their landing sites. In addition, during uncrewed operations, the LTV will provide autonomous operations for science and technology. NASA and the Johnson Space Center work
and continue to take steps with Artemis and creative solutions that will provide new opportunity for exploration of the moon. I'd also like to congratulate Laura and her team. I know they spent a lot of time and hard work to reach this point. Now, I would like to take a moment to ensure that we all recognize the importance of this announcement. If you'll indulge me for a moment, let's take a step back in our memory and try to remember a time when you were a child. Most likely, your world was as large as the range that you could move under your own power at that time. Now try to remember how it felt when you first gained the ability to move beyond the boundaries of that world. For me, that involved learning to ride a bike. Maybe for you, it was something different. Roller skates, roller blades, skateboard. Maybe it was a wheelchair, or maybe it was even access to public transit for the first time. Regardless of your technical solution, you could now reach places that were previously off limits to you. Enhanced mobility fundamentally changes one's world. It changes where you can go, it changes what you can do. Quite simply, it changes what you can learn. Science is our toolbox for learning, and enhanced mobility is one of the most important tools in that science toolbox. Science itself is one of our fundamental reasons that we're going to the moon. Science will help us learn about the moon, about how we survive in space, and that will help us build that blueprint for exploring away from the Earth. The moon is a treasure chest of science that can unlock the secrets of our solar system and teach us more about our home planet for the benefit of all. The lunar samples returned from the Apollo program dramatically changed our view of the solar system, our place in its evolution. And scientists continue to this day to unlock new insights from those samples. The diversity of Apollo samples increased when the lunar roving vehicle enabled exploration of more surface area per mission. That diversity of lunar knowledge is what we seek now. Observations from previous robotic explorers in space and even an impact mission on the surface have proven that permanently shadowed regions on the moon, including some craters in the South Polar region, contain frozen water. Yet we are only scratching the surface of knowledge that the moon has to offer us. Future samples from Artemis missions will increase that diversity of our knowledge about the moon. The discovery of water on the moon holds promise for both science and human exploration. NASA wants to understand how much water exists below the surface and whether or not we can access it. Better understanding of the sources and concentrations of this water will help teach us how the moon formed and evolved, and may provide resources for our future explorers. Under Artemis, NASA is sending robots and astronauts to explore more of the moon than ever before, including the lunar South Pole, where no humans have ever been. Crews will use the LTV to explore. They will transport scientific equipment, and they will collect samples from the lunar surface from much farther than they could if they were on foot alone. This will enable us to learn more science as we go. With the addition of the LTV, we are combining the best of human and robotic exploration. Between the Artemis missions, when our astronauts are not on the moon, NASA can use the LTV's remote operation capabilities to continue exploring. It means also that we'll be able to operate the LTV to meet our crew when they arrive on the surface. That means they'll be ready to go right away to focus on all the exploration that benefits the most from having our astronauts there. And then after the crew leave, the LTV can continue remote operations for additional exploration, prospecting, science, similar to robotic explorers that we have on Mars right now. This can help us identify priorities for our next crewed missions. With NASA's Artemis campaign, we are building up the capabilities needed to establish a longer-term exploration and presence of the moon. And the LTV is one of those capabilities that will enable us to conduct more science as we explore. As we will learn to live farther away from home for longer periods of time than ever before, we will build the first long-term presence on the moon and inspire a whole new generation of scientists, engineers, astronauts, artists, and everything else. Mars remains a horizon goal, and what we learn here on the moon, both with our operations and how to interpret the science, that will help us when we're ready to take that next giant leap to Mars. Now, I like to imagine the views and the vistas that the LTV will enable us to see from the surface of the moon. This truly is an exciting next step in exploration. The LTV is truly an exploration vehicle. Where it will go, there are no roads. Its mobility will fundamentally change our view of the moon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And now we'll go to Laura Kearney. Thank you, Victoria. So really excited to be here today. As was mentioned, our NASA team has been working really hard to get to this point. Started a couple of years back. It took us a little while to really understand the requirements for this vehicle and what it meant to ask a vehicle to operate on the moon in the lunar South Pole region, full-time, 24/7, 365 for up to 10 years. So we wanted to make sure we were really getting the requirements set right when we put this request for proposal out. We also wanted to make sure we truly understood our acquisition strategy. As was mentioned, we want to make sure we are pushing the commercial industry forward and making sure we are establishing a robust lunar economy on the moon. So it took us a little while to make sure we understood what that requirement set was. Once we got the RFP out, our procurement team really kicked in, and they have worked really hard for the last year maintaining the schedule so that we could be here where we are today. So I am really excited to have the three gentlemen sitting here to my left. We've been waiting to this point where we can start engaging them as a program going forward. So a little bit about the EVA and Human Surface Mobility Program. We are charged with delivering and integrating the EVA spacesuits that will be used to walk on the lunar surface, the LTV that we are here to award today, and the pressurized rover. Together, these three elements will provide the first surface elements for the astronauts in the early Artemis missions. So we have a responsibility not only to deliver these elements on cost and on schedule, but to make sure they are integrated well and meeting all of the objectives of the Artemis enterprise as well as of our science community. So again, we're very excited now that we have these companies and these teams on board, we can better understand what their designs are and how they integrate into the infrastructure that we are charged to support for the Artemis enterprise. A bit about the structure of the contract. It is what we call a service contract. So we have asked these companies not only to design, develop, and deliver a lunar terrain vehicle, but to also get that vehicle to the moon. So as part of their proposals, they propose not only the design of the LTV, but also how they launch it and how they will land it on the lunar surface. Each of their contracts will include that full scope, but they are not actually authorized to do the work until we have put a task order in place. And so by doing this, we will have competitive task orders throughout the life of the contract that ensures we maintain robust competition, we continue to get innovation, and we get the best value for the government and long-term commercial economy. So how we do that at the beginning is we have what we call a feasibility phase. It's a task order that each of these companies will get. It's about 12 months, in duration, and leads up to the preliminary design review. And so during that time, our NASA teams will be working with them to understand what their designs look like, iterating with them on where we can make improvements, and understanding how they incorporate into our overall lunar architecture. Once we get past that point, we will have a follow-on subsequent competitive request for proposal go out. Well, they will then compete for what we call a demonstration task order. That demonstration allows them to finish the development, get the LTV to the moon, and demonstrate it on the surface prior to the arrival of the Artemis 5 crew. We anticipate only being able to award that demonstration task order to one of these companies. Once that demonstration is complete, we'll then move on to what we call service task orders, and that will be an annual cadence where we will work with our Artemis enterprise customers as well as our science customers, and on an annual basis, we will award a service contract for them to provide both crewed and uncrewed services throughout the remaining life of the contract. So again, we are really, really excited. Our congratulations to the three companies from our team. We are looking forward to jumping in with you guys and certainly making LTV a big success.
Thank you, Laura. We will now hear remarks from each of the selected companies in alphabetical order, starting with Steve Artemis of Intuitive Machines. Steve?
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and receive this award on behalf of our Moon Racer team, which is the reusable Let me write this down here. It's a reusable autonomous crewed exploration rover team. Our team is made up of AVL, Boeing, Michelin, Northrop Grumman, with Intuitive Machines as a prime. So we're very excited. I remember about a month ago, I was in this room in a press conference celebrating a successful soft landing on the moon. And this next step, this LTV award, is just an exciting next step to put the most critical piece, or the first critical piece of infrastructure on the surface. We're going to need this world-class team to do that because, as you saw in the video, the environment on the moon is harsh. You know, we have 500-degree temperature swings. The South Pole region is rocky and craggy and shadowed. It's going to stress our suspension, our drivetrain, our power systems, and our autonomous driving algorithms and software. And we're going to need this globally integrated team to pull that off, to allow this rover to live for 10 years and provide the service that NASA is asking for. I think what's really important also is to applaud NASA for this non-traditional, forward-thinking procurement. It really is exciting that not only are we going to support the Artemis campaign with crewed missions and uncrewed missions, but also it's commercially available for us as a commercial business to sell capacity on that rover and do that for international partners and for other commercial companies and space agencies around the world. So this is another first, this LTV contract in a burgeoning cislunar economy. And I'm really happy to represent our Moon Racer team and to be here and appreciate NASA's award. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Next up is Justin Cyrus with Lunar Outpost.
Hi, my name's Justin Cyrus, and I'm the CEO and founder at Lunar Outpost. For those of you who don't know who we are, Lunar Outpost is the leading mobility provider in the world. We have 4 rovers that are headed to the lunar surface. First one this year, later as a part of the IM-2 mission. Shortly after, we'll be a part of the IM-3 mission going to Reiner Gamma, and a commercial mission to follow, and an international collaboration from there as part of the Australian Space Agency's Trailblazer program. So I'm honored to be here representing our company, but also our amazing team. So our team consists of Lockheed Martin, General Motors, MDA Space, and Goodyear, who are all providing critical components of this overall contract. Now, our team combines proven human and robotic heritage, which is extraordinarily difficult to come by, and we're very fortunate to have as a part of our group. And what we're doing is taking not only this space heritage, but we're taking cutting-edge technology and automotive industry strengths to provide a true off-road vehicle capable of allowing us to live and work on the surface of the moon. With a strong focus on commercialization and enabling the new cislunar economy,
that thing looks
our
cool,
team
doesn't it?
is well positioned to help NASA take the next leap. As a part of the Artemis campaign, our LTV design emphasizes astronaut safety, alongside groundbreaking new capabilities that enable new mission profiles, including notably enhanced science mission returns, alongside building and maintaining infrastructure on the surface of the moon. I am truly humbled to be here on stage at Johnson Space Center, where as a kid, I grew up right down the street, watching the people of this center and watching the people of NASA continue to constantly push boundaries and explore new horizons. And that spirit of constantly pushing, improving, and exploring is what's led me to be here on this stage today. So first of all, thank you for that inspiration, and I really hope I am able to be a part of this program and inspire the next generation. Now, I do also want to thank NASA and Johnson Space Center for letting us have the opportunity to get humanity back to the moon and on to Mars, hopefully this time to stay. And I will do my best, and our team will do our best to make the most of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. We'll now hear from Jarrett Matthews of Venturi Astrolab. Jarrett?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Astrolab is on a mission to move humanity forward by building and operating a fleet of multi-purpose planetary rovers for transporting crew, supporting science and exploration, and robotic cargo logistics on the moon and eventually Mars. First, I would like to express my deep gratitude to NASA for giving us this opportunity to work alongside you on the LTVS project, and to the Astrolab team for working so hard for years on the LTV design and for putting together such a strong proposal. The Astrolab team is comprised of many incredible individuals with decades of experience in human spaceflight, mobility, and planetary robotics, and I'm so proud of them today. I would also like to thank our LTVS team members, Axiom Space and Odyssey Space Research, who are bringing to the team their deep experience in crew interfaces, crew training, flight software, simulation, safety and mission assurance, and mission operations. And finally, our strategic partners at Venturi, who are bringing their cutting-edge advancements in electric mobility, energy storage, and lunar tire design. Astrolab has been working for over 4 years on our commercial platform called the Flexible Logistics and Exploration Rover, or FLEX. FLEX is designed to operate on the moon for years and is purpose-built to help establish a permanent human presence on the moon and to serve as a catalyst for the lunar economy. The first commercial version of FLEX is scheduled to land on the moon in late 2026 with up to 1.5 tons of commercial cargo. The mission will allow us to validate our strong commercial model prior to sending the FLEX LTV for NASA's Artemis campaign. Everything NASA has ever accomplished has been because they can assemble great teams, and that's exactly what we've done at Astrolab. So on behalf of everyone involved with our team, we are honored, humbled, and so very much looking forward to working with NASA to deliver the most capable and versatile rover the world has ever seen. Thank you.
All right, and thank you to all of our briefers for those initial remarks. We'll now move on to the question and answer portion of today's news briefing. For all media, both here in the room and on our phone bridge, please remember to state your name, affiliation, and to whom you'd like to direct your question to. And with that, and for those who are in the room, just raise your hand. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi, Eric Berger with Ars Technica. Thanks for doing this. Question for Laura. You talked about a 12-month feasibility phase, and then there's going to be a competitive RFP. I just want to understand how you're going to maintain competition, but also it sounds like there's just going to be one team building one rover LTV that actually gets to the moon for this program. And so at what point do you cut from 3 to 1, and how long does that last? It seems like it's going to be a fairly brief competition in that sense.
The current plan, again, a lot of it is based on available budget. And so right now the intent is to just run this feasibility phase through the 12 months, as I mentioned, and at that point, one demonstration. But that said, this contract mechanism is extraordinarily flexible. We can bring task orders onto this mechanism at any time. So depending if another use comes in, we can certainly turn on another task order for another development or service effort. We also have an on-ramp clause that allows other companies to come onto this contract in the future should they have capability. So really it is a matter of objectives, requirements. If we have customers that come with additional funding, we have a contract mechanism that will allow companies to continue to compete for future demonstrations and service periods.
Okay, thank you for that question. And just as a reminder for those on our phone bridge, please press 1 to enter into our queue. And if you found that your question has already been answered, please press star 2 to withdraw it at any time. And with that, we'll take another question here in the room.
Oh, thank you. Mark Carreau with Aviation Week and Space Technology. I have a few technical questions. And I don't know whether you've specified this yet, but if you could explain how these guys are supposed to be powered, what their range could be, and then maybe you could just describe the kind of environment at the lunar South Pole that these will be experiencing in terms of thermal and maybe radiation and other major factors. Thank you.
And perhaps I could start with high-level requirements, and then you gentlemen certainly can jump in. We tried very hard in this requirement set to not be too dictative. We wanted to give just high-level functional requirements, but with an understanding of what the environment is. One of the big challenges at the lunar South Pole is power, given that we are in shadow quite often. So the NASA team had done a lot of analysis to try to understand how we would navigate to an area where we could get to areas where the sun can get to the rover, and we can at least have some kind of power that way. We had derived a certain number of hours, a minimum number of hours that we put on this contract. But we did not limit and we did not define how these systems had to be powered. So they were able to provide innovative solutions and certainly able to provide what I would call excess capacity. If they could, for instance, meet 150 hours and it allows us to stay in darkness longer, that just provides more operational flexibility for us. So that is absolutely one of the driving requirements. As far as thermal, it was mentioned we can swing hundreds of degrees one way or another once, beyond being in the sun to being in the shaded area. Radiation is a big one, to be able to keep electronics alive in that environment. We have asked the companies to meet a 10-year operating life. We did not define how they needed to do that. I use polar examples just to prove a point. They could, for instance, come in and say, I'm going to deliver one rover, it's going to last 10 years, or I'm going to deliver 10 rovers that only last 1 year. And that way they have the trade space to say, maybe I can fly COTS electronics, but I'm going to have to replace them once a year. Or I have to be extraordinarily robust because I'm going to last 10 years. Those are bounding cases. None of them proposed either of those. But we wanted to be able to give them, again, these high-level requirements, and then they could innovate on how they wanted to solve those problems.
I'm happy to hop in. So our company and our team more broadly has some pretty cool technology around this. It's a big part of what we're actually figuring out over the course of our first 4 rover missions to the lunar surface, basically how to squeeze every last watt of power out of these battery systems and conserve that energy for as long as we can. So on our first rover mission, we're just lasting the lunar day, which is a much easier challenge to solve than what we're doing here as a part of LTVS. Second rover mission, all right, now you can start looking at potentially lasting a couple lunar nights. By the time you get to the 3rd and 4th rover missions, then we're looking at operating months at a time, all the way up to years at a time, depending on how those technologies are tested. Another member of our team that we're extraordinarily excited to have is GM. So that's something that they are providing as a part of this overall LTVS program, is their new battery technology that comes with much higher energy density that can survive the extremes of the lunar surface. Of course, with a little bit of modification, but it's truly amazing energy storage technology that we're very proud to be bringing into the Artemis program. So our team over at GM will be providing our battery technology, and then Lockheed Martin and Lunar Outpost will basically be figuring out how to make the most of that technology moving forward, so we can not only survive the lunar night, but truly operate for many years at a time during the lunar day and lunar night.
All right, thank you. Before we go to our phone bridge, we'll take one more question here in the room.
Hi, Beverly Casillas for Space Scout. And I guess this one's also for Laura. What kinds of knowledge and resources is NASA sharing with these providers to kind of help accelerate the development of their concepts? We've seen, like with XEVAs, NASA provided things like the XEMU data, as well as resources like the Argo system to help with testing in the gravity environment. Could you provide any information about what kind of resources EHP is providing? Thank you.
Yes, we are using a very similar model to what we had on, we call it XEVAS, it's the EVA acquisition. We've had a lunar LTV team working within our engineering directorate here at Johnson Space Center for quite some time, building prototypes, understanding requirements, trying to get an idea of what these systems might look like. And we make all of that data available to these companies in a technical library for them to use and learn from and leverage from. So all that data is available. As we execute this contract, we will have a NASA, what we call Insight team, which will work side by side with these companies, again, providing lessons learned and information back and forth. And then also similar to our EVA contract, we will utilize what we call government task agreements. And so as part of their proposals, they actually provided, gave them information on what kinds of assets, whether it be a testing facility, materials, certain knowledge that we have here at the Johnson Space Center, and actually all centers across the agency. We made that available to them so that they could then propose back to us where they would like to use those capabilities as part of their overall proposal. So certainly Johnson Space Center here has a lot of facility capability, zero gravity or lunar gravity offloading systems that we anticipate them to use. We have some virtual simulation capabilities we anticipate them to use. And then, of course, this is where we will be bringing the spacesuits in and integrating the human element along with our crews and our engineering test subjects. And so all that capability is being made available to them as they go through the development process.
Yeah, I'd answer that too. For Intuitive Machines in our team, we've made extensive use of the GTA process that NASA offered across multiple centers, and whether that's Ames Research Center for autonomous driving, path planning, they have some great algorithms that do that, and whether it's Goddard Space Flight Center for communications, or whether it's Johnson Space Center for the Argos gravity offload system. So there's quite a bit of capability in the agency which we plan to leverage. That was part of our proposal and priced accordingly. So this is really going to be a government and private sector partnership that builds this LTV and delivers it to the surface.
We've actually been testing our lunar tire prototype here at Johnson Space Center for the last year, as well as at NASA Glenn through the NASA Announcement of Collaborative Opportunity program. So separate from LTV, but that technology is going to be applied to LTV.
All right, thank you. And just as a reminder, if you are online on our phone bridge, please press *1 to enter into the queue to ask your question. And with that, we will go to Jeff Faust with Space News.
Good afternoon. A couple of quick questions for Laura Carney. What is the dollar value of these initial task orders the three companies are getting? And then also, how many proposals did NASA receive for the solicitation? Thanks.
I think I am probably going to have to pass on both of those since we are technically still in a blackout period with these companies. So once that blackout period is over and source selection statements are released, I think that some of that information at least will be available to you.
All right, thank you, Laura. We'll take another question on our phone bridge. Kenneth Chang with the New York Times.
Hi, thank you. So the question is, how much time will there be for other customers to use the LTV, and how does the coordination go between NASA and the commercial customer if NASA needs the rover at a certain place for the next Artemis mission?
For those of you who have shown up late, I'm going to give you a quick rundown
this
once they're done with their stuff as to
really
what selections were
strategize
made
on different models for how we might establish those agreements. We understand, at least we believe, in the early phase, NASA is going to have to be somewhat of an anchor tenant. And then we hope that over the 10-year operating life of this vehicle, we can start bringing in more and more and more commercial requests as the market evolves. So as I mentioned, we will have these one-year service periods. And we started a model where the first service periods tend to be more NASA requirement driven. So NASA, either through our science requirements or our exploration requirements, will carry about 75% of the burden or so, freeing up about 25% of the capacity for other commercial uses. We have other mechanisms on the contract where, as we go over time and NASA perhaps becomes less and less of a user, we can open up more and more of that capacity for the commercial space. We also put processes on the contract where we have science and utilization teams that come in and they help us understand what their objectives are. We have joint agreements with the companies where we can get together and say, over the course of this next year, these are what our objectives are. This is the mission that we want to meet. And NASA ultimately, even though this is a commercial service, especially when it comes to crewed missions, and crew safety is paramount. NASA still has mission authority and risk acceptance over how this vehicle is operated on the lunar surface. So we have set up, through the contract structure, a lot of that I would call governance and authority infrastructure to make sure that we are collaborating with the vendor, both on mission objectives and on crew safety and vehicle reliability.
And if I may, we're really excited about NASA's services approach. That allows companies like ours and like the others on stage here today to start bringing more people into the cislunar economy. Something, that not widely talked about. We're not a public company, so we don't have to disclose this, but we're actually a majority commercial revenue company. As a space company that's called Lunar Outpost, right? That doesn't exist 10 years ago. That doesn't exist 15 years ago. But through these new opportunities that NASA is providing to companies like ours, we are able to bring in those non-traditional space customers, international space agencies that are part of the Artemis Accords, and also a new block of new space companies that are helping drive value in the ecosystem. So it's been really exciting. 2 out of our first 4 missions are actually fully commercial, where one is NASA and then the 4th one is an international space agency. So we're really looking forward to trying to scale that as part of the LTVS program, and we're very excited about the opportunity to bring some more people into the overall ecosystem.
All right, thank you, Justin. We'll now take another question on our phone bridge. Bill Harwood with CBS News.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up on Mark Carreau's question earlier, trying to get a general sense of some of the at least aspirational goals each company has. For example, what kind of ranges are we talking about? I realize you don't have a solid answer to that yet, but maybe can you bound it for us at least? I assume all 3 are solar powered. Are you envisioning solar panels on the vehicle for recharging or some kind of charging station? And maybe anything you can tell us about tire technology. We're all familiar with Apollo 17 and the kind of wheels they had back then, but what are we looking at now? And I realize you don't have specifics perhaps for us, but just give us some general ideas of what you're looking at. Thanks.
Well, let me interject here, Bill. A lot of this is competitive, right? So what we did was we crafted feasible existence proof of a design to meet the RFP requirements. We are going to go through a year-long process now to get to what Laura said was essentially a PDR design for the delivery to the South Pole and also for the demonstration mission for that LTV. There's a number of the subsystems that we've put in as the initial design that will be traded over that 12-month period that will give us a better understanding of things like survive the night, operate during the night, how effective solar arrays are versus fuel cells, what the drivetrain needs to look like, what the battery life extensions are, what the suspension needs to be, and tires in particular. We've brought Michelin on board, who's done extensive work on lunar tires with the Glenn Research Center, and so that research has been going on for years. And so a lot of this work we have answers to, even our sparing strategies that will allow us to extend the range and gain greater and greater capability out of this LTV as we learn about it and refine the design. And that's what this first design development season of 12 months is all about. So I don't want to give you specific numbers because we will work as hard as we can to exceed the requirements that the government has asked us to do. Because it's in our best interest as a commercial business to have more capability to provide to commercial and international partners.
Yeah, as Steve said, it's a competition, so holding the numbers a little bit close, but I can say Goodyear Tire Technology, absolutely awesome. I'm really excited to see how they can bring some of the technology that we're using as a part of LTVS back down here to Earth. I want a set of those tires for my own off-road vehicle, but hopefully you'll see some cool pictures. And I do think we have them in our render as well, so happy to share that publicly. But the tire technology truly is a step forward for exploring other planetary bodies.
Yeah, and I'll just say, at Astrolab, we're a very hardware-rich, iterative design approach kind of company, and we built a full-scale, fully functional terrestrial prototype over 2 years ago now and have been doing thousands of hours of testing in the field with it. We frequently take it out to the Death Valley area in California. And that has allowed us to stress the hardware and actually try out our tire prototypes in the real world environment, as well as in our environmental chambers that we have at our company. And so our tire technology has actually already been in thermal vacuum chambers. It's currently on an endurance test rig at NASA Glenn. And so we're coming into this with a lot of experience already with the technologies we're planning to apply here. Like my colleagues here, or the others on the stage here, we intend to exceed NASA's requirements. I can tell you, some of those requirements are that it travel 15 kilometers an hour, that it be able to traverse 20 kilometers in a charge, and be able to support a full 8-hour EVA. So all those are the base level requirements, and again, it's our intention to exceed those by quite a lot in most instances.
All right, thank you, Jarrett. We'll now take another question here in the room.
Hi, this is Eric Berger again. Question for either Jacob or Laura. I just want to get a sense from you of whether you think the commercial space industry is ready to step up to this challenge. I mean, the initial lunar rovers, from Apollo lasted for a few days, and now you're asking for something to last for 10 years in a very harsh environment, harsher than where the Apollo missions were. And so it's like a huge kind of a quantum step. And so first question is just give me a little bit of philosophy about why you think that sort of the industry is ready to take that step. And secondly, I just want to confirm this is planned to be landed prior to the third human landing on the moon, probably Artemis 5, but it's just be for the third human mission. Is that right?
So I'll answer the second part. So again, under this contract, they have proposed their own mechanism for landing on the moon. So it is not really tied to the Artemis human missions. Our objective and our plan is to have an LTV on the surface prior to the Artemis 5 crew arrival. If they can get there earlier, we'll take it earlier. If it's there for the Artemis 4 crew, all the better. And certainly as soon as it's on the surface, it can start doing unmanned teleoperated science. So again, we're not fundamentally linked and tied to a specific Artemis mission necessarily. As far as whether they're up to the challenge, again, I mentioned we spent quite a bit of time gathering industry data through requests for information, trying to understand where we thought the state of the art was, what their capabilities were. I know we're asking a lot of these companies, but I think as you hear these gentlemen talk, I think they're up to the challenge, and we are certainly here to help them be successful.
Eric, I would add a comment to that in terms of a burgeoning cislunar economy or commercial economy. If you dovetail this with the commercial lunar payload service contract, we now are set for an annual cadence of mission deliveries to the surface of the moon. We've had our first successful mission. We'll have another one this year and another one early next year probably. That sets up for that delivery. And building off of the core of that experience, we can continue to evolve the lander technology to the point where we can get a reliable delivery system called Nova-D, which takes 1,500 metric tons to the 1.5 metric tons to the surface in the South Pole. So delivery is there, right? And we'll be there building on what NASA's already done to instigate the commercial market. Now, the stressor requirement that Laura and her team put out about the 10-year survival can be solved in many, many different ways. And so thinking innovatively about how to do that, dovetailing that with a sparing strategy. Now, if you have a regular cadence of missions, you already have a commercialization plan where we're seeking commercial business to augment what the government anchor tenant is. And then you say, on top of that, I can deliver spares, I can deliver additional rovers, whatever it needs to survive that 10-year requirement. Versus, do I have to invent something brand new where every component, including bearings and suspension and batteries, survives 10 years? So some of that thinking's gone in and you just haven't seen in the proposals.
Yeah, and I agree with Steve wholeheartedly. I think because LTVS exist as a part of the Artemis ecosystem, we are able to leverage those other opportunities, whether it's part of the CLIPS program to prove out heritage on the surface of the moon, or whether it's to leverage high degrees of heritage of our partners and that testing that we can do here on the lunar surface that's going to happen as a part of these other programs as well. And that's something Apollo didn't have. When Apollo was putting the LRV on the lunar surface, it was the first time that rover was on the lunar surface. First time most of that technology was on the surface of the moon. So if we're able to test out not only the tires, which I mentioned earlier, Goodyear tires, in a vacuum here on Earth, but if we're able to put them on the surface of the moon, understand exactly how they interact with that regolith and what that wear is going to be like over time, that provides us a lot more data and a lot more knowledge on how to meet these very difficult requirements that are a part of the LTVS program. So because of that Artemis ecosystem, that really allows us to have a much higher degree of confidence once we put this LTV on the lunar surface.
Yeah, and I would just like to commend NASA for your process here. Maybe people aren't aware, but the first request for information for this program came out in early 2020. There was another one in 2021, a draft RFP, et cetera. And we were engaged in that conversation all along, and NASA has really, I think, taken to heart the industry input, not just on the technological limitations and the requirements, but on the commercial constraints that we're operating under and allowing for commercial activity on these missions. So really appreciate that. We have a similar strategy where we've already signed an agreement to go to the moon in 2026 to prove out our commercial model, and we've last year announced a number of companies who have signed up to go with us on that mission. And that mission, of course, will be a precursor to LTVS and allow us to learn and improve the system before it serves the Artemis campaign.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit about your point about the harshness of the environment. There are some areas in the polar regions that are extremely harsh. There are permanent shadows where we never see sunlight. But there are other aspects to the South Pole that we understand because of the observations we've made over the last several decades. We've had the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter looking at the moon since 2009. We've learned a tremendous amount. And so I think we need to be careful when we talk about the South Pole as being harsher than elsewhere on the moon. There are some aspects, and the reason we're going to the South Pole is that there are some attributes that make it a little bit easier. So we often hear talking about surviving the day. Well, a lunar day in the South Pole can be hundreds of Earth days, depending on where you go. That's the knowledge that we have learned over the last several decades that really enables us to take advantage of the lunar environment to our benefit. That data helped us develop requirements. It's the same data that's available to all of our teams to also determine how they want to go about this. And I thank them for bringing their innovation and creativity to this. That's why we're approaching this the way we are. We want to hear these different solution sets so that we can take advantage of the moon. So instead of viewing the moon as a harsh environment that's difficult, I would suggest that maybe we view the advantages we can use to our benefit at the polar region. Again, that lighting, it can be hard if you go into the dark places, but it can be easier if we are taking advantage of places with longer access to light. And so I think with the knowledge we have gained, the knowledge that's available to them, I'm confident in what we can do moving forward.
All right, thank you, Jake. We'll take another question here in the room.
Hi again, thank you. So with the understanding that we're early in the design phase, many features may be subject to change. Maybe you don't want to show all your cards just yet. But if you could, what newer innovative capabilities is each provider most excited about providing with their design? And how do you see that, helping your vehicle contributing to that sustainable lunar presence in the long term? Thank you.
I didn't hear the whole question. Go ahead, jump in if you did.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So what capability are you most excited about providing that may be newer, innovative, or different, if you can share? And how do you see your design contributing to that sustainable presence in the long term?
For me, I'll lead off and have my fellow awardees talk. But I have a strategy in Intuitive Machines where we don't necessarily aggregate all the risk into a single launch. So
Producer,
by providing components at a certain size in an economy, you can actually.
Folks, I apologize for cutting in on the NASA broadcast, but in my opinion, we're getting to the point to where these folks are just not going to provide us any more really critical information about this. This is a competitive contract still in process. There's a lot of information being kept secret, a lot of cards being played close to the vest. And so these folks have told us pretty much everything that they're going to tell us about their projects up to this point. So I would like to, and once again, I don't want you guys to have to wait here all night while we get through all of the journalist questions. I would like to instead give a summary of what has just happened here, especially for the benefit of people who are joining us late. I'm really beginning to wonder whether or not I should start talking favorably about companies anymore publicly, because NASA went and chose everybody except the two companies that I'm fond of. Dynetics and Sierra Space were both passed over on this proposal opportunity. Interestingly enough, it appears that Lunar Outpost, who was originally teamed up with Northrop Grumman and Intuitive Machines, jumped ship. I didn't see any news that confirmed any of that, but that's obviously what has happened. Lunar Outpost jumped ship over to the Lockheed Martin and General Motors team. And so that team was selected for their vision of LTV. And then Intuitive Machines and Northrop Grumman and Michelin remained on that team, and they got selected as well. And then interestingly, Astrolab, who has been working on a solution for lunar mobility for a very long time now, they received the third selection. What I find to be very interesting is not necessarily that Dynetics was passed over, but that NASCAR was passed over. We're talking a government organization based out of Houston, Texas, that just snubbed NASCAR. I'd say that those that if I were NASA, one of the NASA folks who made this decision, I'd be worried about my car getting keyed while it's in the parking lot for making a decision like that. But I just saw a number of folks talking about Daytona 500 on the moon and stuff, and NASCAR was part of the Dynetics team, and they were passed over. For better or worse. Also, the designs are radically different, from one from another, obviously. And this is very interesting because it appears that NASA is still keeping, is still riding the bleeding edge, shall we say, when we're talking about technology here. Instead of selecting the easy, reliable types of lunar landers that they could have selected in the past, they went with Lunar Starship and Blue Moon, which is, unproven, lots of untried technology. Who knows how long it'll take to develop it or whether it'll work, but they went with that instead of what's safe. And it does appear that they're doing a lot of that here as well. For example, the Dynetics rover that I saw, the mock-up that they had a lot of the same aspects, a lot of the same characteristics of the Apollo rover. It had these wire mesh tires. They talked a lot about tires. Well, they showed what they were going to be using on their rover, and they were these, or at least that was their idea at the time, were these wire mesh tires, just like the Apollo rovers had. And also, as a matter of fact, the chief designer of the rover was one of the engineers who designed the original lunar rover for Apollo. very old man at this point, but I got a chance to talk to him at the last space symposium, and all of that looked very much like what Apollo had already done. Looked like that they were, maybe making a somewhat improved version of an Apollo rover, but for the most part, it was an Apollo rover. And instead, NASA is jumping on board with these other companies that are coming up with more innovative, more groundbreaking, more daring solutions. Now, does that mean that it's the best choice? Not necessarily. I mean, it might have been a good idea to take what Apollo had already done successfully and improve on that and do something similar, just a better version of it. But instead, they're going for radically different designs. And like I say, that may be the right thing to do, or it may not. We'll see how that goes. Once again, I'm not going to lie. I'm disappointed that neither Dynetics nor Sierra Space were selected in this process. I think that that's a letdown because I think that those are two very capable companies. But at the same time, I do think Intuitive Machines have the advantage of having already put something on the moon, for better or worse. I mean, once again, I'm still waiting for some official information as to what exactly, what sort of data we actually got off of the Odysseus. I have no idea exactly how much data we got off of those instruments, how successful was the mission really, but it doesn't matter because they actually successfully put something down on the moon and it survived and it was able to operate for the most part. So they have a big leg up as far as that's concerned in terms of actually having accomplished lunar operations recently. And I think that probably gave them a big advantage. But still, the old boys club, there's been some mention made of that, but then again, some of the old boys club got cut out. Some of the old boys club was not selected. Well, I take that back. I take that back, guys. Now that I'm having a chance to actually look at who these teams actually are, the old boys club is very much included in this whole thing. We've got Lockheed Martin. They're definitely part of it. Northrop Grumman. They're definitely part of it. Really, yeah, the old boys are definitely part of these teams. There's no question. The companies that were not selected also included Teledyne Brown Engineering. Nissan North America was also cut out, whereas General Motors was included. Now, once again, does that sound maybe a little bit political that we had an American company included, Japanese company, not so much? Maybe, it's hard to say. Very interesting, the selections that were made. But still, am I saying that NASA made bad choices here? No, definitely not. I want to get a closer look at everything that they did. All of the designs, that sort of thing. And I'll be releasing a video covering the details of all of this. But still, what I observed, what I can take away from this tonight is the fact that it appears that NASA is really trying to take a big step forward here. They're trying to embrace newer and more innovative designs for a relatively basic application, a relatively basic unpressurized lunar lander that's supposed to be providing relatively limited mobility compared to a pressurized mobile habitat, which is what the Toyota Moon Cruiser is. And there may be other proposals besides Toyota's, by the way. JAXA has assumed responsibility for the pressurized rover, but, NASA may not leave all of that under JAXA's jurisdiction. They may decide to include other companies, other agencies in that process. But so what happens next? Well, obviously we've got the competition, we have development, these initial deployments on the moon, that sort of thing. But another thing to remember, guys, is we're not going to be seeing these vehicles for a long time, a very long time. because we've got Artemis 3, obviously, which has no mobility whatsoever required. Artemis 4, there were some questions being asked there as to whether or not Artemis 4 was going to be a lunar gateway deployment and not a human landing on the moon. That is actually not true. It is a combination of a lunar gateway deployment and a manned landing on the moon will also be taking place. Lunar Starship is contracted to put humans on the moon for both Artemis 3 and Artemis 4. But with Artemis 4, we are also going to have the deployment of the lunar gateway, the first two components, which is the power and propulsion element and the halo module. It's the tiny little habitation module. Those will be deployed by Falcon Heavy. And so these vehicles are not going to be deployed until Artemis 5. Now, Artemis 5 is projected to be no sooner than 2029. If we are talking realistically here, it is, in my opinion, highly unlikely that we're going to see Artemis 3 anytime sooner than 2028. And then Artemis 4, maybe 2029, maybe 2030. But once again, that's if everything goes as close to perfectly as we can imagine, which is unlikely. So I would say that it's very, very unlikely that we're going to see these unpressurized vehicles actually carrying astronauts across the lunar surface until the early 2030s. That, I think, is probably what's going to happen. Sorry, we have a contribution from one of our viewers. Go ahead, Mike. Right. Okay. So, all right. So, yeah, interesting observation. An interesting observation that's been made, and you guys can't hear what this person is saying. He's actually talking to me over Discord. In any event, it's an interesting observation. The reason NASA may not be going with some of the traditional legacy providers is because a lot of them will not accept responsibility for a fixed price contract, and so it's a lot of the newer guys who will embrace a fixed price contract. That is possible because a lot of the folks like Boeing and companies like Boeing have stated very, very solidly at this point that they won't do fixed price contracts anymore. It's all cost plus. I can kind of see why they're doing that, because Boeing Starliner has lost Boeing over $1 billion, probably more than that, because it's a fixed price contract. So I can see why the old boys may not be going for that. But still, we'll see how all that goes. Alan, thank you so much for the $5. Really, really appreciate that. And folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our coverage here. Want to express my appreciation for you guys joining us. It's been a very exciting announcement indeed. The fact that we have all these companies participating, I do think that there's a lot of innovation here. I think there's going to be a lot of cool new technology involved in these contracts. I'm excited to see what's going to come next in that regard. So once again, please please subscribe. Also, please consider supporting this channel on Patreon and PayPal. Details in the description, because I am on my way to Colorado Springs next week to attend Space Symposium and talk to all of these contractors in person and hopefully secure interviews with all of them. So until then, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.